All right, we're coming up on round two of the 2024 college football playoff, just a few days away here. We got one game on New Year's Eve, three on New Year's Day. In this video, I'm going to go through them. I'm going to talk for a few minutes about each game, then I'm going to go ahead and give you my prediction. All of the home teams won in round one right before Christmas, so we had the on-campus games in the first round of the playoff. All the home teams won. They were the higher seed. They were favored. So basically, all the favorites won. Are we going to get that again in round two? We've got four games. Penn State versus Boise State in the Fiesta Bowl. That's New Year's night at 7:30. We've got Texas versus Arizona State in the Peach Bowl. That's 1 o'clock on New Year's Day. Ohio State versus Oregon in the Rose Bowl, 5 o'clock New Year's Day. And then capped off with the Sugar Bowl, Notre Dame and Georgia, 8:45 on New Year's Day. I'm going to run through these games in order, going to give you my prediction for them. But I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not on here to make some kind of hot take or anything like that. I think the favorites probably win the majority of these games, if not all of them. Let's start with Penn State and Boise State. Boise State's a good story. To me, that's about where it ends. I like Ashton Genty, Alberti and Worthington Smithton, whatever we're calling him now. He's a hell of a running back. Boise State does not have the roster top to bottom. They don't have the lines of scrimmage. They don't have everything else you need to compete with the big boys of college football. That's just my opinion. I'm not likely to change my mind. Even if for some reason Boise State would beat Penn State, which I think is extremely unlikely, I think there's a 0% chance a group of five team will ever win 3 or 4 playoff games in a row, which of course is what they would have to do to win a national title. They don't have the depth. They don't have the talent. They don't have the size. They just don't have the rosters that these Power 5 programs have, the upper echelon Power 5 programs have. In fact, I've been stating this for years. I think it's a total disservice to the group of five that they don't have their own playoff. I know now in the 12-team era, they're guaranteed to get one team in. But what about the other 60-something teams? They're basically playing for nothing. Yes, a lot of them get bowl invitations, and I'm not here to shit on bowl season, but we all know what it is at this point. These bowl games are becoming less relevant by the minute. I think the group of five would be better served if they just split off in terms of postseason from the quote-unquote Power 4 or Power 5, whatever we're calling it. Let the group of five have their own 4-team, 18, 12-team, 16, whatever they want to do, postseason and playoff. And there's nothing stopping them from doing that now. They could do that now if they wanted to. And again, I'm not saying any of this to shit on Boise State. I'm really not. I've enjoyed watching Boise State. I watched Boise State beat Oklahoma in the Fiesta Bowl in 2006. It was one of the greatest moments in college football history of my lifetime anyway. It was just unbelievable ending to that game. And as sports fans, really across all sports, we love to root for the underdog. And would I like to see Boise State or a team like Boise State make a run at some point in a playoff? I'd love to. But I've got to be honest, if it weren't for the fact that Boise State had a bye in the first round, I don't even think they'd be playing in the second round. I just find it hard to believe that these group of five teams are going to be able to do anything significant in the playoff against Power 5 teams. Again, is Boise State good enough to beat Penn State? Yeah, once or twice out of 10 times, maybe, and that 1 or 2 times may happen New Year's Eve at 7:30 and they beat them. But then they got to turn around and play Georgia or Notre Dame and, they'll lose. Go back to the TCU. I know TCU's not a group of 5 teams, but just hear me out. The year that TCU got into the playoffs, there was a lot of people that didn't like that. They don't belong. They lost their conference championship game. They're not as good as team A, B, C, D, or E, and those teams didn't even get in. Why is TCU in? This doesn't make any sense, blah, blah, blah. And then what happened? Well, TCU went out and beat Michigan. And, did that shut everybody up? Not really, because they went on to lose to Georgia by 50 points. And everybody was right back on the they didn't belong thing. And that's kind of my point with Boise State or whatever team it is that happens to be in Boise State's position in these years going forward under the new playoff format. Could one of these teams win a playoff game against a highly ranked Power 5 team? Yes. I mean, we've seen Central Florida beat Auburn in a New Year's Six Bowl. We have seen group of 5 teams beat good Power 5 teams. We have seen it. We've never seen them beat 2 in a row. Never mind 3 or 4 in a row, which is what it would take for anybody to win the national title now in this new playoff format. And I just think it's extremely unlikely that a Boise State or anybody like them will ever have a run like that. So in this game here in particular, kind of strength on strength when Boise State has the ball. They, of course, love to run the ball with Ashton Jeanty, one of the best running backs in all of college football, one of the best running backs, really statistically speaking, that we've seen in a long time in college football. Broke a lot of records, came close to breaking a lot more records, a Heisman finalist. And Penn State's got a really good defense with a really good front seven. They're tough to run on. Penn State offensively, they also like to run the ball. Drew Aller, play action pass guy. They, off of that run game that they have with Nick Singleton. And is it Katron Allen? Is that the other one's name? Anyway, they got the tight end Warren, who I love. I just think Penn State is too talented, too deep, particularly in the trenches. A lot of people are talking about the Boise State-Oregon game and how close Boise State was to beating Oregon. And that, look, was a hell of a game for Boise State. And we can talk about how close they were to winning from now to the end of time. But being close to winning ain't winning. And, if Boise State comes close to winning in this game against Penn State, their season will be over. And I think that's what's going to happen. I think Penn State is going to win this game. Would I be shocked beyond belief if somehow Boise State pulled it off? No. But if they beat Penn State, I'd bet my life savings they lose the next round. They just don't have what it takes. And again, it's nothing to do with Boise State in particular. It's the group of 5. They don't have the depth overall, top to bottom, to set the drop off from, first to second string, just everything down the line with the group of 5. I just don't see it happen. This is not basketball. In basketball, you can have like an 11, 12, 13 seed, whatever it is, make a run. We've seen 12 seeds end up in the Final Four and stuff like that. You get 1 or 2 really good players on a basketball team, they can compete with almost anybody. Football is just not that way. It's the ultimate team sport. And I just don't think, as good as Boise State is, as exceptional as Ashton Jeanty is, I just don't think Boise State has the players to make a run in this college football playoff. Great story, great season. I think it ends New Year's night. Give me Penn State. The line is 11.5. I don't know that I'll bet that. Penn State offensively now has probably played their 2 best games in their last 2 games. A loss to Oregon and a win over SMU in the first round of the playoffs. I was surprised, really, at how well Penn State looked offensively in both of those games. Drew Aller, the quarterback at Penn State, has kind of caught a fair amount of heat over the last couple of years. James Franklin, of course, the head coach, all kinds of heat over the last couple of years with his inability to win the big game. And let's be real, they've caught a little bit of a favorable draw here, Penn State has, getting SMU in the first round. Look what the ACC has done in bowl games. The ACC is now 1-9 in bowl games. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean that SMU isn't any good or didn't deserve to be in or anything like that, but it is an indication of the level of competition they've been playing all year long. Penn State catches them in round 1, beats them into oblivion. Round 2, they end up with the group of 5 team. So pretty good draw here for Penn State. I think they get the win, 11.5. I don't know. I'd like to see it closer to 10, but anyway, that is the line. I think Penn State wins. I don't think it'll be particularly close. On to New Year's Day, Texas versus Arizona State in the Peach Bowl. Texas is favored by 12.5. This is the biggest line of any of the playoff games. Texas is a bigger favorite over Arizona State than any other team is over their opponent during the round 2 of this playoffs. Texas coming off a win against Clemson after dropping 1 to Georgia in the SEC championship game. Good game between Texas and Clemson. Clemson had their chances in that game down inside the 5-yard line, chance to make it a 1-score game, unable to convert. Texas defense comes through when they needed it to the most, but they gave up a lot of yards to Clemson in that one. Arizona State, Scatterboo. Is that going to be enough? It's a lot like the Boise State situation. Ashton Jeanty's great, but, what do you have beyond that? Same thing kind of with Arizona State. I mean, they're not totally one-dimensional and relying on just one player, but a large portion of what they do relies on Scatterboo at running back. Same with Boise State and Jeanty. And if you look at the Tennessee-Ohio State game from the first round, there's still a little bit of a misperception about Tennessee overall, that there's some kind of a air raid team that throws the ball all over the place. They're not. They run the ball and they play good defense. And Ohio State took away Tennessee's run game, right? Dylan Sampson was injured, unable to play for the majority of that game. And when Tennessee could not do what they've been doing all year, but Dylan Sampson was 75% of what Tennessee was doing this year. He had, 25 touchdowns or whatever. That was just ridiculous. Once that wasn't an option for Tennessee, they had no plan B. And I'm worried that that's going to end up being the case here with Arizona State if Texas is able to limit Scadaboo. I don't think there's any taking away Scadaboo. I don't think there's any taking away Genty for Boise State. But I do think both of these defenses, Penn State and Texas, are good enough to limit what Scadaboo and Genty can do. Would the Arizona State quarterback be able to throw Arizona State to a win against Texas? I doubt it. I still think Texas has a pretty good defense. Some questions marks around Quinn Ewers. Is he injured or not? He doesn't appear to be playing up to his potential lately. I've heard ankle injuries. I don't know. He hasn't looked great. I'll say that he hasn't looked. He hasn't looked bad, but I don't know. When you watch him, it looks like something's wrong. I don't know. I was shocked that they didn't put Arch Manning in during the SEC championship game. Now we're going back 2 games ago now, but again, not to the degree that Boise State is undermanned, but I just feel like Arizona State is undermanned here compared to Texas from a depth perspective. The ability to rotate players in and out during a game so that when you need players to be at their best in the fourth quarter, when the game is close or the game is on the line, they are, because you've been able to give them breaks over the course of the game without much of a drop-off in production on the field. Texas just has a huge advantage there, to me, over an Arizona State. I wouldn't at all be surprised if this game is close in the first half, but I do think Texas ends up pulling away and winning this one. I'm going to take another favorite here. I think Texas gets it done against Arizona State and advances with a win in the Peach Bowl. And then you move on to the other 2 games, which are much harder to pick. The Penn State and Texas picks to me are pretty easy. They're both massive favorites, 11.5 for Penn State, 12.5 for Texas. Not too hard to pick the winners of those in my mind. These other 2 games, that's not the case. Ohio State is only a 2.5-point favorite over Oregon. Georgia is only a 1.5-point favorite over Notre Dame. Let's start with Ohio State and Oregon, 5 o'clock in the Rose Bowl. Ohio State a 2.5-point favorite. Now, these 2 teams, of course, both in the Big Ten and played in the regular season. In Eugene at Oregon, a great game, one of the best games of the season. And even though Ohio State lost that game, up until the Tennessee game for Ohio State, I thought that was the best game Ohio State had played all year. It was an unbelievable game. It's kind of a cliche, I guess, the whole, either team could have won that game. Either team could have won that Oregon-Ohio State game. One more bounce went Oregon's way in that one than Ohio State's. Now, you can credit Oregon for that. They obviously made it difficult on Ohio State. You had the whole end-of-game scenario with pretty bad clock management there from Ohio State, and then a Will Howard slide for no reason, with I'm sure he wished he could have back. And in any case, Oregon ends up getting the win. And now here we are a couple of months later in a playoff scenario, neutral site game. And even though Ohio State lost in the regular season to Oregon, they're now favored by 2.5 against Oregon. Now, we're a reactionary society in general, but particularly when it comes to sports, right? So you go back to the end of the regular season, you watch Ohio State completely dribble it down their leg in a loss to Michigan. And then you look ahead to their Tennessee game and you go, how are they going to beat Tennessee? Look how bad they looked against Michigan. Well, then they come out and play great against Tennessee and blow them out. And now people are going, whoa, did you see how good they looked against Tennessee? How can Oregon compete with that? It's a reactionary thing. So I'll be honest with you. When it comes to Ohio State, and if you've been watching this channel over the course of the season, I've said this or something similar to this a bunch of times this season. I do think Ohio State's the most talented team in the country this year. I don't think it's particularly close either. And I believe that if Ohio State plays up to their ability, there's not a team in the country that can beat them, including Oregon, including Michigan, who did beat them, including Oregon, who beat them once before, Penn State. Going forward, Georgia, Notre Dame, Penn State, whoever they wind up playing later on in the playoffs. You give me any team in the country, including Georgia, Notre Dame, whoever, and you tell, okay, Ohio State's going to play up to their ability, and their opponent's going to play up to their ability. Wouldn't matter to me who the opponent was. I would take Ohio State. I just think at their best, given the skill they have, the depth they have, the overall talent they have, I don't think there's a team in the country that can beat Ohio State when they're playing at their best. Now, that might not be breaking news. The question, of course, is, are they going to play at their best? Because they've had a hard time doing that consistently over the course of this season. You go back to the Oregon game. While I think they played really good, I don't think they played at their best. You look at the Nebraska game. They're really lucky to escape that Nebraska game with a win. They got dominated along the lines of scrimmage in that game. Nebraska had a chance to win that thing at the end. Pretty lucky to escape that one with a W. Even the win on the road at Penn State, although a good win, they didn't exactly light it up offensively. So I don't think they played their best there, right? Then you, of course, have the Michigan game, probably their worst game of the year. And then followed up by the Tennessee game, probably their best game of the year. So it's been a little bit of a yo-yo season for Ohio State. And honestly, that's been the case for a lot of teams. You look at Georgia and Notre Dame in the game we're going to talk about in a minute. You know, Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois. Now here they are in the playoffs, and they're a pretty damn good team, right? It's kind of an up and down thing. Georgia gets blown out by Ole Miss. They're down 30 points to in the first half to Alabama. But then they go on the road and beat Texas. Handle Tennessee easily at home. Beat Texas again in the SEC championship with a second-string backup quarterback after Carson Beck got hurt. So it's just up, down with a lot of these teams. So which version of Ohio State are we going to get in this game? Now, Oregon, on the other hand, with Dylan Gabriel, ton of skill position players, good lines of scrimmage, NFL players all over the defensive side of the ball. They're fast. They're physical. They remind me of an SEC team on the West Coast. They've been the most consistently good team this year. They're the only undefeated team, right? They beat everybody they played. They beat Ohio State in the regular season. They beat Michigan in the regular season. They beat Penn State in the Big Ten championship game. They had a bye during the first round of the playoffs, and now they draw Ohio State in the Rose Bowl. So, they've been the most consistently good team across the board. Have we seen them play their best game? I thought they played really good at home against Ohio State, and turns out it was good enough to win. That was for certain, right? I do think Oregon has the ability to beat Ohio State. Obviously, we've seen them do it. I also think Ohio State's got the ability to beat Oregon. You can't overestimate the importance of home field advantage in college football. We saw it in the first round of the playoff games. You saw it in this first Oregon-Ohio State game, how difficult it was for Ohio State on the road. That is a huge help. A monster home environment is worth so much in college football. I think college football probably has the biggest home field and home environment advantage in all of sports. Definitely in all of sports within the United States. If you want to talk about soccer and some of those crazy European countries, maybe they get a little amped up too. But, compared to like the NFL or Major League Baseball or the NBA or any other college sport, I think home field advantage in college football is just massive. Now, we obviously don't have that here. So it's not that Ohio State has an advantage over Oregon. It's not a home game for Ohio State. But Oregon does not have the advantage that they had the first go-round, which was the home environment and the home field. There was a lot of talk when we expanded to the 12-team playoff about whether or not any team would ever be able to go undefeated again playing this amount of games, on top of the fact that you've now expanded the conferences and added some pretty good teams to the two big conferences, the SEC and the Big Ten. Would there be a team go undefeated? I don't think there will be. I don't know if surprised is the right word. I did pick Oregon to go 12-0 in the regular season. They were the only team in the country I picked to go 12-0, and they were the only team that went 12-0. And I can see Oregon winning this game. If Dylan Gabriel gets hot, Oregon has the skill position players to match up with Ohio State, and not very many teams even come close. This is two NFL junior teams here going at it, and no outcome in this game would surprise me. I just think Ohio State found another gear in that Tennessee game. I think they're going to come out and let Will Howard sling it around on Oregon just like they did on Tennessee. They will run the ball. Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins are two NFL running backs. They're not going to abandon the run, but they're not going to go conservative like they did against Michigan either. Will Howard, a full year now at Ohio State, whereas when these two teams played the first time, he was still relatively new to the system, only 4 or 5 games in, whatever it was. if Ohio State can even give me 95 or 96% of what I got from them in that Tennessee game, I think they will win. I'm going to take Ohio State to win the Rose Bowl. They're favored by 2.5. It was a 1 or a 2 point game last time. I'm going to lay the 2.5. I think Ohio State beats Oregon, gets revenge from the regular season. We end up having no undefeated teams this year. Ohio State moves on in this scenario because I've already predicted this other game. But in this scenario, of course, they would face Texas in the next round because I think Texas is beating Arizona State. And that brings us to the Sugar Bowl. Already did like a 20-minute video about the whole Carson Beck out, Gunnar Stockton in. What does that mean for Georgia's offense type of thing? If you're interested in my thoughts on how that might affect this game or Georgia's offense, you can click back a couple of videos and watch that. I don't want to rehash a lot of what I said in that video here. I think these are two similar teams as they are currently constructed. Now, you go back and you look over the course of the regular season, that was not the case. Georgia threw the ball all over the place this season with Carson Beck. Georgia threw the ball percentage-wise more than they've ever thrown it in school history this year. It's about 65% throwing, 35% running. Usually it's the other way around. Georgia's been known as RBU. You run the ball, run, dink and dunk a little here and there, right? No 1,000-yard receivers, one in school history, that kind of, the whole reputation that Georgia has. That kind of got thrown out the window this year. Carson Beck was the best offensive player, so they said, well, we might as well let him run the offense and sling the ball around, and that's what they did. Notre Dame, on the other hand, with Riley Leonard, a running quarterback, was a run-first team. They average less than 200 yards per game through the air. It's not that Riley Leonard can't throw the ball. The strength of Notre Dame is to run the ball with Jeremiah Love, and Riley Leonard helps there too. So that's what they did. They averaged about 180 yards passing a game. They're in the hundreds in most passing categories. Again, that's not a slight on Riley Leonard or Notre Dame's wide receivers. It's an offensive philosophy, right? They run the ball, and they're really good at it. And they've got really good running backs, and Riley Leonard can run the ball. So I'm not saying they can't throw it. I'm saying they didn't throw it. Georgia, on the other hand, they threw it and they didn't run it. Not to say they can't, but they didn't. Well, Carson Beck is out. Gunnar Stockton is in. And while he's not as good as Riley Leonard, he's definitely not as experienced as Riley Leonard, right? He's the same type of player as Riley Leonard. He's a running quarterback who doesn't necessarily have an NFL arm. And again, that's not a slight on Riley Leonard. Some Notre Dame fan somewhere is going to say, oh, he can throw the ball 80 yards on his knees. Riley Leonard's most likely not an NFL quarterback, but you really shouldn't care about that. Are you a Notre Dame fan or are you a Riley Leonard fan? Riley Leonard's not even a Notre Dame fan. He's just a mercenary that's there for 1 year. But so the point is, Georgia in this game, everything you've seen from Georgia offensively, forget it, gone out the window. They've got the worst wide receivers in the country anyway, so maybe it's a blessing in disguise, but I expect Georgia to run the ball 70% of the time in this game. ETN should be the healthiest he's been all year at running back. Now, with the Robinson boys, they've been basically on a milk carton all season. It's unfortunate, but injury bug has derailed them. But ETN's 100% healthy. Nate Frazier, the true freshman, has been playing all year long, as long as he can avoid the fumble. He's a hell of a young running back. And Georgia's tight ends are pretty good, and they came on at the end of the year, and tight ends can be a young quarterback's best friend. I think you're going to see a lot of running the ball from Georgia with the running backs, a lot of designed quarterback runs for Gunnar Stockton, a lot of zone reads and RPOs, a lot of rollout passes, designed to get Gunnar Stockton out on the perimeter with some sort of run pass options, a lot of short passes, swing passes to the running backs out in the flat, tight ends on crossing routes, curls, short out routes, things like that. I don't expect a downfield passing game, at least not much of one here from Georgia. Not that they won't take a shot here and there. They will. They'll take their shots, but I think they're going to run the ball. This is going to be a running match. Whoever can control the clock, time of possession, line of scrimmage battle here between Notre Dame and Georgia. Notre Dame's going to be without their best defensive lineman. Unfortunately, he got injured in the first round game against Indiana, and he's done for the year. So I think this is going to be a low-scoring, time of possession type of game. Turnovers could be critical in this game. The possessions are going to be limited, I think, because of the style of offenses we're expected to see here, which is a lot of running the ball. So possessions are going to be limited. So turnovers can be critical in this game, causing turnovers, hopefully not committing turnovers. If you're a Notre Dame fan or a Georgia fan, you don't want to be turning the ball over. Like the Ohio State-Oregon game, no outcome here will surprise me. I would not at all be surprised if Notre Dame beats Georgia. Notre Dame is a legitimately good team. They deserve to be in the playoffs. I think they're one of the best 4 or 5 teams in the country. They have got the talent and the skill to beat Georgia. Do they have the coaching to beat Georgia? That remains to be seen. I can't think of another team in the playoffs right now that if they lost their quarterback 2 weeks ago would be favored in any of these games. And that's sort of a tip of the cap, I think, to Kirby and what he's been able to accomplish at Georgia with some of the previous quarterbacks he's had. It's obviously great that Georgia ended up winning that SEC championship game, given what happened to Carson Beck. The bye week has given Georgia 3 weeks between games here to install an offense that Gunnar Stockton is comfortable with, that suits his style of play. And, of course, it's given Gunnar 3 weeks of practice with the ones to get comfortable with that offense. I don't know what type of performance we're going to see from Gunnar Stockton. He's never started a game. He's a third-year guy, so he's been in the program. He's been in the system for now 3 years, but he's never started. The most he's ever played was when he had to play the second half against Texas in the SEC championship game. And while he didn't light it up through the air, outside of that one bad decision, I thought he played pretty well. He obviously showed his toughness with some of the runs that he had there. He's not a Jalen Milroe guy who's going to hit the corner and run 80 yards down the sideline. But on 3rd and 6, he's going to lower his head and pick up 6 yards. Or he's going to get his head cut off trying to, like he did in the Texas game. I don't think you're going to see him sliding or ducking out of bounds. He likes to contact. He's a between the tackles type of guy. Sort of like a Tim Tebow style. No, I am not comparing Gunnar Stockton to Tim Tebow or saying that he's as good as Tim Tebow. I'm talking about the style of quarterback that they are. Sort of short, sort of possession type passes. And when he runs, he likes to run between the tackles. So we'll see. I think either team can win this game. I'm going to go with Georgia. They're the favorite. All 4 of the favorites won in the first round. It would be much more interesting if I were to come on and pick some upsets here, but I'm going to be honest, like I mentioned, this is not college basketball. The favorites tend to win in football for a reason. There's a reason Georgia's favored. There's a reason Ohio State's favored. There's a reason Texas is favored. And there's a reason Penn State is favored. I'm going with all the favorites to win the game. Now, as far as covering the spreads, I haven't even really decided how I'm going to bet on these games yet. Georgia's a 1.5-point favorite. If you think Georgia's going to win, you might as well lay the 1.5. Ohio State and Oregon, even if you like Ohio State, I think you got to think a little bit about that one, given that the last time these two teams played, it was a 1-point game. Texas at 12.5 and Penn State at 11.5, that's a big number. You got to think, so these teams could be up 17 points in the fourth quarter. The game's over, right? They win. They're winning by 17. They're covering the spread. And, you put the backups in and the other team scores a touchdown in the last minute of the game. And all of a sudden, instead of winning by 17, you're winning by 10. And they don't cover the number. So there's just a lot to think about with those big numbers there. But I do think all 4 favorites win. At least those are my picks. Now, will one of the underdogs win? Probably. I'm not confident I'm going 4-0 in these picks here. I've been watching college football a long time. I am not very confident that I'm going to get all 4 of these right by just going with the favorites. Notre Dame can beat Georgia. Oregon can beat Ohio State. I think that's pretty obvious. Anybody in the comment section or anyone else that goes, oh, Georgia's beating Notre Dame and it's not even close. Or Notre Dame's beating Georgia and it's not even close. Ohio State's beating Oregon and it's not even close. Oregon's beating Ohio State and it's not even close. Yeah, it is. These are extremely difficult games to pick. Extremely hard games to pick. These are the best 4 teams in the country. Period. The winner of the Georgia-Notre Dame game is going to beat whoever they play in the next round and advance to the national championship game. The winner of the Ohio State-Oregon game is going to beat whoever they play in the next round and advance to the national championship game. All 4 of those teams are better than Texas and Penn State. They just are. So that's my prediction there. Now, will one of the massive underdogs win? Could Boise State pull it off against Penn State? Could Arizona State pull it off against Texas? I actually think there's a better chance that Arizona State beats Texas than I do Boise State beats Penn State. even though Texas is a bigger favorite over Arizona State than Penn State is over Boise State, Arizona State's a Power 5 team. And I'm going to be honest, at times this year, Texas has looked pretty average to me. They don't really have a big win. I mean, they beat Clemson in the first round of the playoffs, but Clemson finished ranked 16th. They weren't even technically supposed to be in the playoffs except for the... Sorry. Must be all those sit-ups y'all had me doing yesterday. Clemson wasn't even supposed to be in the playoffs except for the fact that they won the ACC, so they had to get in. And I'm not taking that. Texas is a good team. I'm not saying they aren't. They might be the second most talented team in the country behind Ohio State, but they haven't really played like it the majority of the time. You know, they beat Texas A&M, but they struggled to score against them. They lost to Georgia both times they played, Texas did. And in those two games, they averaged like 1.2 yards per carry. In the SEC championship game, Texas had 28 carries for 31 yards. It's just like, and Georgia's defense, while good, is not where it was in 2021 or 2022. There's some kind of all-time great defense. So I don't know. I've got some concerns about Texas. I did pick them to win, so don't cry in the comments section with the horns down or whatnot. I'm just saying, I do think there's a better chance Arizona State beats Texas than of Boise State beating Penn State. But I'm going with all four of the favorites to win in this round. Let me know down below how stupid I am. Have a good morning.